save it for the fans.
Hey, I save everything for the fans, Kyle. Here we are in the Motion Design Hotline. I'm sweating like a pig at a bacon store, so I'm going to leave my glasses off for now. That's my folksy way of saying.
Don't dig too much into that metaphor. Just let it be.
Exactly. I'm sweating like a human at a human eating contest. This is an off week. You're in the pirate feed of Motion Design Hotline.
Is it?
You can tell by the insane words coming out of my mouth. I got cooked on a jog today, so my brain is a little bit soupy. So we're going to be picking up what we left on. Yeah. We put it down, we pick it up. We are going to be doing the stuff that we did not get to last week. So last week we were all about responsive design ideas and thoughts and techniques. So we're going to be keeping on with that. What should I say? Oh, right.
I mean, look, I could pull back the curtain just a little bit and say that realistically, it's one question that we didn't have time for last week, and then some other stuff that we came up with that's related enough. So if you have questions about this that you want us to see, please say that, because that's literally supposed to be the point of the show.
Right, and I guess we steamrolled over it. The point of the show is that people ask us questions about After Effects and motion design, and then we attempt to help you as best we can.
We do help them.
Sorry, we don't try to do it. We do it.
We do it.
So I'm glad that you've tuned in for all of this do, and I don't know, number one, number two, there's something here. There's something. We'll figure it out for the rest of the show. If you have questions, we got a form. You can use the form in the description down below. Smash that like and subscribe. Send us questions.
Or you can, of course, go to the best website ever that was always intended to be a real website for real people.
Yeah.
The one and only motiondesignhotline.com, which is definitely not just a Notion page.
Yes, it's not a public-facing Notion page. It's a real website for real people. Hey, it gets the job done, you know? It's a list of things. I think in my mind, this be cool, Theo. We are the weirdos.
Theo gets it, yeah.
Yeah. This is the type of show that if you get it, you get it. And if you don't get it, you get gone. We are full of tautologies today. So speaking of... Okay, the question that came in was kind of a circular logic one, right?
Well, sort of. So the last episode was all about, in both Premiere and After Effects, ways that you could have things pay attention to primarily the edges of the frames. And we did, some other things, getting things to pay attention to, say, a text layer, for example. Some of these are actually quite easy in Premiere, fortunately. But in After Effects, you have to use some code to do it. And so Evan built a thing that pays attention to the size of the composition that you put it in. And Joel Pittrell, who, longtime viewer, longtime commenter.
I should go to your screen. Let's go to Kyle's screen.
Well, I guess you can. I did prep it, but it was more for myself. But here it is. If it, being the thing Evan built, were to be used on a composition as an essential property, does it know the size of the composition it is now a layer of? And this is one of those things that you kind of even have to explain a little bit. I have tried before. Verbally explaining essential properties becomes very difficult because you have to so you put a thing in a composition and then you feed a property up, and now that composition goes into another composition as a layer or as a pre-composition, and that property is now exposed. It becomes difficult to describe with words. You kind of just have to show it.
Yeah, the property is up and back. Sure. Okay, yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, it's all levels. It's wheels within wheels. It's mirrors within mirrors. It is House of Leaves over here. House of Leaves, good book. Check it out.
I do have an answer to this question. The short answer is, as built, no, but it's totally possible. Yeah, there's a good reason for why it's no, though.
Okay. Oh, it's a good no. Okay.
Yeah.
So if it is used on a comp as essential property, does it know the size of the comp it is now a layer of, or a layer within, I guess.
I feel like I should take a minute and just build this so that we
Okay, yeah.
make sure that everyone is on the same page about what we're even talking about.
Oh, that's true. And if you want to build
Um,
your own, you can
mhm.
download the file because we made it as a preset that
Correct,
you can
correct.
just apply. So, oh,
So I'm
and
gonna
yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say spoiler for the second half of the show. We're going to be talking about the new presets that are in After Effects beta,
Hmm.
many of which created by yours truly, me, and a
And
lot
many
of
of which are
those.
very responsive. So
Yeah, and a lot of those are we'll say advanced mode, um, advanced mode responsive. So okay,
yeah, and we try to go. That's the thing with a lot of responsivity um, in here is that you can do a lot of stuff if you want to start adding a lot of code.
mm,
Um, and we have very codey episodes, and then we have episodes where we try to make sure that it's not going to make people's brains melt. So,
well,
um,
true, and we end up pontificating
oh
pretty
yes,
long
of course,
lengthily about
yeah,
nebulous concepts that I honestly I think are best they are best learned experientially. So I
yes,
honestly
yes,
believe that code, because it is similar to a language, you must learn it by speaking it and writing it and doing
yeah.
it. And until you rock the rails on it, um, is that it? I guess it's rock the
But we
dials.
can help give you vocabulary.
Yeah, like until you're pulling, you're tilting the dials yourself, it doesn't make a lot of
Mhm.
sense. Just like until you're actually speaking Spanish or French or whatever, when you're just conjugating verbs, you're not. It's not helping. So, without further ado, let's help some people.
Okay, so I just have a completely blank project here, and I'm going to create a new composition. And just to be very clear about things, I'm going to make this composition 400 by 400. Okay, kind of a weird little size, um, and I'm going to call this build, and this way we can keep track of what's what. Okay, so in this composition, I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to double click on my shape layer tool, which of course makes that shape at exactly the boundaries of the composition. So if I wanted to make this a circle instead, I just choose the circle tool, double click, and now, ta-da, that size. But I want it as a rectangle, so I'm going back to that. I happen to already have this set to just a stroke and no fill, which,
Hmm.
again, you get all these power tips for free, folks. You can Alt or Option click on the little thumbnail right up here to cycle through those, or of course use the lovely Properties panel.
Hmm.
So I have an otherwise transparent composition here with just a stroked square that is exactly the size of our composition, right? Because our composition is 400 by 400 and my shape is 400 by 400, as you can see on the size property there, or again over in the properties panel. So if I wanted to make sure that this shape was always going to be exactly the size of whatever composition it were on, I could write a little expression to do that. So let's go ahead. I'll alt click right in here, and I'll just create a variable that I'll call x, and I'll create a variable that I'll call y, okay? Because we're going to take these, we're going to define these two values and plug them back in to the two values that make up this property. So we're going to say for x, it's going to be this comp, the composition we're in right now, dot width, semicolon to end the line. For y, we're going to say this comp dot height, semicolon to end the line. And then we just need to tell those to go back into the actual property. We can say x comma y inside square brackets. That's how you make what's called an array. And so this comp this is going to look exactly the same because it's just feeding it the same values we already had, right? But if I were to open up my composition settings again and say change it to everyone's favorite vertical video, now my composition size has changed, which means this property has changed. So now it's 1080 1920 because that is the size of this comp, both width and height. Okay, so that's effectively that is the code that was doing the work in Evan's preset as well, which is what this question was based on. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Essential Graphics panel here. and I'm going to put this size property up in there. After Effects is going to say, hey, you have an expression on that. Are you sure you want to do that? I will say yes. Thank you for the lovely warning. I'll go ahead and get rid of that other stuff so it just says size. And then just to kind of help clarify this, let's grab that stroke color and put that on here too. Okay, so guess what else I'm going to do is go ahead and take this back to being a 400 by 400 composition, just so that it's very different than the one that we're about to put it in. So we're back to being that square, okay? I can close this. Now let's build a new composition, and I'll call this use or use. So we have our build, and we have the thing in which we're using it, all right? And let's go ahead and make this our favorite vertical video size. And here we go. And so now if I bring that build composition into my use composition as a layer, as a pre-comp, either way, you'll see it is indeed the 400 by 400 size that you would expect out of the composition. But if I twirl this open, we have those essential properties that I fed to this thing. And so we can change those right here and give ourselves all kinds of delightful editability here. These are also visible again in the properties panel, which is really great, especially if text is involved. It's an easy place for it. So we all know what we're talking about now. Every single one of us.
Yeah, all of us, everyone involved.
Yeah. The question was, can this size property be aware of this composition that it is now in? Okay. And as I said, the short answer is no, not directly, without doing something in this composition. And that's because any composition here in After Effects can exist in multiple compositions, right? So use 7 here. Let's go ahead and change this to some other size here. We'll make this a nice wide one. Whether the essential properties are involved or not, our build composition now exists in several different compositions, and those could all be different. So there is not directly any way to code right here in that original pre-comp. There's no way to say, in my, I'm going to use heavy air quotes because this is not actually a term, but in my like parent comp, look at that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because there's no way to do that in the code logic because it doesn't just have one place it can go.
Okay, so we could say this comp, the one we are currently in. We could name a composition.
Exactly.
We could index a composition, but we can't say nth. Well, even if we did say nth composition, we're still saying a specific composition that we want.
Yeah. So instead of saying, you know, this comp, like look at what I'm currently in, I could feed it the name of a specific composition, and now it should, well, I broke something. Maybe I did not code that correctly, but, or I didn't type it right, something. I should be able to, I probably need quotes around it. Yes, not double quotes. It's looking for the name of that composition. And so that should do it. Okay, so now it's actually looking at the composition named use 7 for the width and height. So you could specify one exact composition, but again, this isn't flexible in the way that we're wanting, right? So let's go ahead and undo that back to where, this comp. I'll go ahead and get rid of all these extra copies. So there is a solution here, and it's that you just need to put the code here instead of actually inside here. I'm just going to copy paste this, and if I were to create an expression here, it's going to override that, which is again warning me of. I actually don't even need to retype it because it's already here. If I just kind of let this code be, now it's going to be aware of this composition. But I don't see it. Well, that's because this is where it gets even, I'm baking your noodle even further here. It is currently calculating the size of this composition. That just happens to be outside the bounds of what it can show us, unless I click this little collapse transformation switch. And so there is the long-winded answer to, to the question. Absolutely possible. You just have to understand where to do it.
The falcon cannot see the falconer. The center
Yeah.
cannot hold.
So hopefully that was helpful to talk through, but I thought this would be a good one to go through because the logic of it is similar to some other things you might need to think through where, like, yes, that's possible, but you need to kind of think through where you're able to do that. You have the same limitation if you're making a motion graphics template and you want to send this to Premiere. It can't be aware of the size of the Premiere sequence, but you could give yourself, say, sliders or something to enter those manually, which is a bummer. But sometimes you just have to be aware of what it's capable of.
Yeah, and I think methodologically, I guess the real important thing is like anything that you want to control with the central properties, we got to simplify it down to a control. And I think because it's supposed to talk to Premiere, right? Like, and Premiere does not have a script or an expression language to point at things. Yeah. And
now, go ahead.
I mean, there are scripts and stuff. I think you can still make so. Anyway, it's a different thing. It's a different thing.
I will say though, I mean, depending on what you're doing with this, like, just because you have to enter this here doesn't mean this isn't useful. You just have to understand how it needs to work. Because I could create, another composition here, and we'll make this one if I can type, we'll make this one the traditional, the traditional 16:9 arrangement. So if I were to bring this build in here, I would have to redo all that code and stuff. But if I copy paste this one as a pre-comp that has the correct code on it, if I copy paste that into here, now it is calculating correctly. It's not positioned right, but it's going to calculate that thing exactly as you would expect. So sometimes you just need to kind of understand how things work, and then you can crank out your almost automated workflow if you know the limits.
Yeah, and as long as you're like deriving a lot of things off of that value that are going to like bang, 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 like knock into each other, should be fine. I'm trying to think if there were other kind of hanging quandaries.
I mean, we do have a fair amount of folks hanging with us in the chat. So if that awakened any other questions in you that you would like to see for things that pay attention specifically to the sizes of a composition or go to certain corners or anything like that, let us know and we'll talk through it in hopefully slightly less excruciating detail.
I mean, yeah, we'll try. I'm trying to think. So other things. I guess we could jump over and start looking at some.
Yeah, we could do a preset or two, and then if folks have a question, we'll hop back to it.
All right, let's go to the Evan screen. I'm in the beta here. The new. Oh wait, is it up here? No, it's not really a feature per se. It's just more things over here. So let's talk about some grim graphs. Wait, there is a question. What about circles and or other shapes? Yeah,
I mean, they'd work the same.
Right. Anything that is defined by sort of values. Now, some of them, so for example, circles are confusingly, I guess they're all ellipses because they define themselves by a width and a height, right? So that's 1-to-1 for rectangles. A lot of shapes are a center and a radii, right, coming out of them. And so for those, you would simply need to do a measurement to what is relevant. So usually,
if you want to pop back to my screen, I can like depict this pretty quickly. Yeah. What we're talking about here, these are called parametric shapes, and these would be shapes that are defined by these size values, and that is, different from something where you're just drawing a path. Okay. Parametric shapes are made from the numbos, as Evan would say.
That's an Evanism.
Little secret here is that the rectangles in here are just unrounded circles, of course, and then an ellipse.
Rectangle is an unrounded circle.
I mean, it's kind of true. Every ellipse it's the same as the rectangle. It just doesn't have a roundness value because the roundness is cranked all the way up.
Right.
But it's the same thing, right? But if you're looking at the polygons or polystars, which polygon and polystar are the same thing, a little different than polyshore, though. That's a different entity.
Yeah, he's got so many sharp angles and edgy
buddy.
man, that polyshore.
Yeah. So as you get into these, you can make, stars or polygons. And again, you can see they're the same thing. They're just the polygon is lacking the inner radius control. Okay. But like Evan was saying, in this case, you're in either of these, you're talking more about how many points you have. You have a center, and then you have a value of how far out that stretches. So if you wanted this to touch the edges, you just need to make that outer value 200, and then it will reach out to the edges, at least the points that are directly vertical. If you wanted all of them to reach, they wouldn't actually be the same, because polygon doesn't necessarily fit into a square depending on how many points it has, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
You crank it up enough, it just becomes a circle again. But
circles are back.
Yeah.
Ooh, and because there's some numbo chat going on,
Yep.
many things that we do in our lives are based on the number 10. Yes, except for, critically, time, which is a pretty wackadoo division of things. Thank you, ancient Babylonians.
Or all measurements in America.
American measurements are, what? Let's see, there's 12 inches in a foot, and then we've got 3 feet in a yard, and then your mile is what, 1,440 inches?
Nope.
Oh well.
Not even. A mile is I'll round it way off, but it's 5,000 something feet.
What?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, cool. Well, and then we get into imperial. So there's imperial things, but then I know there's, like, for example, a British ounce and an American ounce. There is an ounce for weight. There's an ounce for volume. So yeah, we're really having a great time with our weights and measures just being totally messed up. I prefer cubits, of course. The only difficulty with that is when the pharaoh changes, all of the cubits need to be remeasured. So,
well, I mean, that's basically the system that we have now, because you use a convenient system where things are based on 10 and it makes sense. We use a system where not only do you, a foreigner, not understand our system, but most of us also do not understand the system. And so people are just constantly Googling or referring to a refrigerator magnet, like, how many teaspoons are in a pint? No one knows. Literally no one knows.
Yeah, just use milliliters, guys. It'll be fine. You'll be happier. And when you're baking, you need to use the weight of the flour instead of the volume of the flour. Anyway, we're getting off track. So
we've gotten way off track. Are there actually questions in here?
Well, I mean, it's mostly talk about various things. Now, critically, when you divide a gram ounces by grams, okay, it's not important why that mental math is so easy for some of us. So this radii question, right? So if you were making a shape and the shape is going to be resizing based on the size of the composition, we basically need to be able to pick which edge the radii is responding to, right? So if you are, let's say you make it tall, should the radii be looking, well, radii is the plural, so I should stop saying.
Well, here, I mean, I'll just do this code real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and just steal this from my rectangle. And go ahead and delete that out of here. So all I'm looking at is the outer radius, and it doesn't, since this composition's a square, it doesn't matter, but yes, I'd have to decide, do I want to use the width or the height? This does get a little tricky here because this is only one value, so I can't use the same code. So I'd have to use, let's say, just the width. And I'll go ahead and keep using variables just for the sake of it here. So this comp width is going to be my radius. But I don't want that. I want half of that. So this comp width divided by 2 will be the radius, and then I could use that same trick wherever I go. But this only works cleanly if we're in something that, if I wanted to be aware of this, then I would need to plug in this height, right? Let's say this comp dot height. And now I would need to find a way to compare them, which I would probably use in this case. I'm not necessarily going to go super far into this, but there's something you can use called math.min or math.max that compares two things and would choose either the bigger or lower number to then decide which of those to choose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it like so the choose biggest or choose smallest of an array of numbers is super helpful, especially if you're taking in many math.mid. Am I right?
Yeah. So here you go. This is, this is working nicely, but not exactly a workflow that you're going to be doing here.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the example.
Yeah, and the usefulness of those, like the whiches max. So, for example, if we were measuring, say, 2 lines or 2 different text widths,
yeah,
and so if someone's name is longer, let's resize to the long name.
Yep.
If someone's title is longer, we'll resize to the long title. If things that get maximally taller or shorter, that type of thing. Anyway, and it because you're taking the bigger or the smaller of any type of array, it can be much bigger arrays. It doesn't have to be 2 things. You can compare like a million things. But yeah, just
that'd be more complex to write and to talk about.
Yeah, but it is a useful, I think, coding idea, right? Take this bit of the vocabulary, put it in your pocket. I don't have to say, if this is bigger, do that. If this is smaller, do that. I can literally just say
there's a function designed specifically to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe what a lot of people don't know is that like this code stuff didn't spring fully formed into the universe, right? It builds up version on version of Java that has more and more vocabulary as people kind of need different functions. Anyway, things get really dicey when you start making your own functions, which is kind of where that's really when you've ascended in this thing, when you're creating your own functions with your own arguments and having arguments with yourself. It's also when you've become insane. So it's good times.
That feels like our segue into your presets.
Sure. Yeah. Let's enter madness. So we won't cover all of them, right? But we'll talk about some of them, maybe the ones that I kind of enjoy the most. I am a big old graph nerd over here. So I'm just going to type graph into our wonderful effects and presets. Let's shrink stuff and close stuff so we can
Evan, so since we're looking at a preset that you built, would it be syntactically correct to call this an autograph?
Maybe. Sure.
Maybe only if it's graphing something about you.
Yeah, exactly. So the way this has been set up, you can just double click on it and it'll poop it out into the world. So let's put the radial graph out here, and it comes with a little bit of animation for the thing coming on. You don't like the animation? Just delete the keyframes. It's not going to hurt my feelings. Well, it will a little bit because I think it's pretty good. But what can be pretty nice about this stuff showing up? Pretty much all of these have, in this case, it's got our radius, how big is the thing, the thickness, how big is the thickness of the donut type of deal. So if you wanted this to be a perfect pie, we would just simply go like 400 by 200, or 400, 400, I think is the way. Plunk, there we go. Now we've got the full pie like that. So pretty nice usability stuff. And then it's all about just plonking in your data values. And if you aren't using some of the data, just leave it as 0, right? And that's totally fine. And it is adding everything up. It's turning them into percentages, and then it is dealing with the lines around here to make sure that they are stroking at the correct amount, right? So it's going on like that. I really enjoy this one there's a few reasons to enjoy it, but one of them is that we can go ahead and give me them switches and modes and make it 3-dimensional. It'll click and whir a little bit, but we can...
You see the little time to render thing suddenly shoot up to a different color.
kind of like that. And then let's go ahead and just give it a little extrudo on here. Borip. And look at that. Hey, we got a fancy graph.
Yeah.
Look at us. We're PowerPointing. We're PowerPointing all over the place. So the reason these are made out of shape layers and kind of constructed the way they are is pretty explicitly so that you can make stuff like this out of them. And they are, these could have been percentages, right? So technically when you are doing a pie graph, if you're doing any kind of radial graph, where's my camera? Anytime you're doing a radial graph, it expresses percentages. I don't mean to be so forceful about that, but they aren't whole numbers. Visually, it can only tell us percentages. So that's...
I think we found Evan's button, folks.
This is one of them. There was a rash. Like I started in this stuff like 15 plus years ago, right? But there was a rash when I was coming in of like, this is peak infographic time.
Right. Very much so.
And infographics are a kind of, in some cases, when deployed well, really elucidate a topic really well. When abused, they are obfuscating data, or they are manipulating the image of data in grotesque ways. And then the worst version is just using them wrong, right? like you should not be labeling things with like whole numbers, because this is only telling us the percentage. Put the whole number in brackets or something, like you can say number of respondents, but you then must also say on the graph somewhere the total number of respondents. So
or use a different kind of graph. Let's be real here.
Use a different graph. Radial graphs do not show volumes, they show ratios. So I took a statistics course in university where they really hammered on people for this. Like they were absolutely brutal with a lot of these things, because people would just turn in data in the most convincing way they could, and they'd be like, "Oh, cool! Watch me tear this up in front of you." I went to a mean school full of meanies, Kyle. Back in my day, we didn't get not only did we not get participation ribbons, but professors made you cry. And they had tenure. They could do whatever they wanted.
Well, of course.
It was a madhouse. Should they have been doing that? No. Were these students totally being ding-dongs? 100% also. It's a wild time out there. Anywho's, I'm gonna try.
We're very tangenting today, but people seem to be along for the ride. So
yeah. So anyway, that's the idea behind this one. You type in the whole numbers. The thing here will compute those into usable stuff. Hey, let's look at the guts of this thing a little bit.
I'd love to.
So let's look at some of the data. And like things like size, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? We're literally just looking at the radii number, and that's going to change the size of a circle. So not much to write home about there. But it's here where we get into what would be the end sort of value of,
the juicy bits is what people call those.
Yeah, this is the tasty stuff. And I'm going to try to align this so it's a little bit easy for us to tell. So thing number one is we have to take in the data. Then we have to take in the total amount of all of the data. And then we are looking at the sort of the data animation, which is animating the slider around. So this one, pretty straightforward stuff, right? We total it all up. We're dividing one by the other, multiply by 100, bada bing, bada boom. We have computed the percentage required here, multiply that by the amount of animation, and we're good to go, right? Not much to say about that. Where things get a little bit dicey is when you get into needing to make the second thing offset from the first thing. So the transform here of the thing called data 2, it has rotated an amount such that its thing is starting where the other one is ending off. Now, there were a lot of methods to do this. We could have been looking at the end of one and using the offset on the stroke to accomplish this one also, right? So there are many ways to get to this. We ended up going
I
rotation.
believe we spent an entire episode talking about almost this exact thing not too long ago.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's almost like this was very front of mind for me. So knowing that with old Trimothy paths, you could change it in those two different ways, right? Very useful stuff. But that's pretty much the methodology for all of it. That one pi wedge, one wedgie is rotating itself to always live at the forefront of the other one as it is moving around. So one references the previous, and that's how we get there. That also allows them to be independent of each other, meaning one does not sort of overwrite the others. So for example, if the pink was actually like taking up 100% of the thing and wrapping all the way through, when we go to turn it three-dimensional, we might get like tearing.
That would be a problem, yes.
Yeah. And if we wanted to do something kind of weird with this and kind of split it up in different ways, we've sort of isolated them in their really specific spaces. So that's the pie stuff. Choices were made. Things happen.
Can you put any sprinkles on that donut?
Oh, I wish. The problem is that we can't apply like texture to it, right? Now, if you did wish to do such a thing, let's go ahead. Let's make it non-3-dimensional, right? Let's go ahead and
you could make a little pill shape, feed it into a repeater, feed that into Wiggle Transform.
Yeah, smash it all over the place.
I mean, this would be the stupidest tangent yet, but
yeah. I want to just get into the properties panel. The other thing about how this was created was it was pretty critical for us to be able to click on the different properties here. And so that's why you can click on this one and you can get, let's say we make this one red. Let's come into this one and we're going to make this one the blue.
And just in case any of you folks are not using the properties panel, this kind of stuff where you can, obviously, it doesn't give you absolutely everything inside shape layers, but a lot of the most useful things that you need, like being able to just kind of go through each shape and isolate those more easily without having to open it all in the timeline, is a really great thing that this enables.
It's a good bit of business. What was I doing here? Something. Right. So if we wanted these things to have texture to them, right? Well, then we could probably deploy them as a type of mask on stuff. So we've got reds, greens, and blues. Well, hey, would you look at that? I got you've got red, green, and blue. I've got an extract effect. So
you would.
We can drop a little extracto on here, and the extract will allow us to observe, say, the redness channel, and we could take, all right, clunk, up, isolated. Boom, we nailed it. So pre-comp this, isolate chunks of it, mask out things with that. Bob's your uncle, which is apparently about nepotism. So there you go. There was historically a Bob. He did give a lot of his nephew's jobs. One
makes sense.
Okay, so I think that's enough about pies.
What else have ye in the new?
Well, so there's the other graphs, right? There's a bar graph, there's a line graph. They behave particularly as we would expect. There are, let's get I like the bounding box. So
hey, there you go. That sounds responsive.
Yeah, so things are about to get real responsive in here. There we go. Let's get a very demanding and commanding thing here. So we got a bounding box. We got a thing that it wants to respond to. Clunk. We go like that. We pick the reference layer. It clonks onto it. And they are now inexorably locked together in a kind of Sisyphean struggle. They are trapped together like Popeye and Bluto forced to exist together for all time and space. And we can pad this away from the thing. We can adjust the handle size like this. So there are a bunch of frames, right? There's a bunch of frame type things that we put in here. And I say we because John Colombo was pretty instrumental in making a lot of this stuff work good. And this in particular, I needed a lot of help to bring this one over the finish line, or this family of them over the finish line. So
A lot of these things aren't that hard to build once, but to make a thing that will work universally for folks who aren't going to dig into the code, yes, is can be a challenge.
So the middle boxes and the corner boxes, like the boxes that live on top of the main rectangle, not a lot to write home about here. So if we just look at the corner boxes, we've got back, left, bottoms, tops, lefts, and rights, and their position is simply referencing one big rectangle and dividing and putting them in the various corners, right? Everything we did last week to get stuff relative to the different corners, easy stuff. The middle boxes are just an extension of that they're finding the midpoint of those lines and sticking themselves over there. So nothing much to say about.
The point is pretty mid.
Yeah, exactly. Very mid. I think originally, these were put into two different groups in case you wanted to make one go away, right? If you were thinking of yeah. Hey, got a big old noodle over here, man. I know what's up. So that this also kind of, because the properties panel was sort of in process while these were also in process. So the idea that, we want people to be able to click on the middle boxes over here, make them go away in this panel. We want people to be able to change the fill color of the middle boxes if they wanted those to be different, right? So could have gotten way more granular with it, but that seemed a little bit, we're starting to really split hairs at that point, right?
And Evan, this would of course work for any layer type that, because you're just telling it which layer to look at, yes?
Yeah, and so let's go to the main event, so to speak, the main rectangle event. The rectangle.
I didn't mean to cut the line here.
I know. So this is where the proverbial rubber really meets the road on this type of thing. Expanding.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Oh, baby, it just keeps going. Okay, what are we at? We are looking at, come on, Beta, count the lines right. A bunch. It's so many. It's totally.
It is exactly one bunch.
Yeah. So what's going on here? This is Crazy Town. Do you have the show Lazy Town in America? Do you know what that is if I say Lazy Town?
I don't think so.
Okay. It's a piece of cake to bake a pretty cake. Does that mean anything to you?
I don't think so.
It's a piece of cake to bake a pretty cake. Anyway.
It just sounds like the kind of weird things you would say.
Think on that for
okay.
For it. I think it's an Icelandic show originally, so there's a lot of things going on. Anyway, so what's happening in this? It's a piece of cake to bake a pretty cake. In this case, we are attempting to measure. So there's a way to measure a text box. There's a way to measure a shape layer. There's a third way to measure an image layer. Right? All three of these behave differently in terms of where they think they are in the world and how we make things go to them, right? So, for example, if this layer, the respond to me layer, its anchor point lives up here in this corner. On an image layer, it generally lives in the middle center of the thing. And
unless you move it.
Yeah, let's just grab our pan behind tool and grab this and move around and baby. Yeah, you know the expression game is strong because it is not giving an F about that, right? And the other thing that's really tight and sick about this is you can rotate it and this thing will rotate to be with it. So there's a lot of
around whatever the anchor point may be on that thing,
and they're not even parented together. So we're basically we're re-engineering the function of parenting through that. And then, of course, you're probably asking, Evan, what if you parent one thing to the other? Well, stuff is going to get pretty wackadoo if you parent in one direction, and then you're going to get some errors if you parent in the other direction. Don't parent.
But if you parented both of them to the same thing, then it should all work fine, correct?
Yes.
Having never looked at this code, but...
And not only that, but if you parent a thing to a thing, then I do stuff with this, it's responding And in fact, it's responding. So notice that the line isn't getting any thicker, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's responding flatly. And that was a big part of it too, that like if you wanted this to just behave like it's parented, you would just parent it, right? We don't need to put in a reference layer. We can just dial stuff in, leave it static if we wish. And if you were to do that, you can just type in whatever values you want for the size of this box. It's fine. But when it comes to referencing things, there's so much of this is parented to that, is parented to that. What is my parent doing? Oh dear. So to that end, and this is a Columbo, this is a Columboism. He brought this to me. And in fact, what is the place? There is like an After Effects expression reference library, right? That is really built out with a lot of interesting examples now. And I think this is from this true scale finder, which is manually measuring a layer in composition space in order to get us what the truest scale of this is. So one of the reasons of wanting to include this type of thing as a preset is that within After Effects now, there are things you can dissect to learn more about the structure of things in After Effects, right? Like that's why it's like, we would have quit on this because, man, that's really complicated, right? But no, it should be in here because this is, if people dissect it at a surface level, you can just use it and it works. But if you go deeper into it, it will teach you things that will hopefully help you apply to other things that you want to do. And in fact, this simple idea of rectangle becomes size of other rectangles, that is the basis for, so it's not just the bounding box one. There is a postage stamp one, which is entirely the same idea, that it's going to reference something, it's going to put a frame around it, ba-bam. And so the only thing that really changes is they all get the rectangle in the same way, and then they all do something different with the rectangle. And that is hopefully methodologically helpful for people to think about, that, oh, if I can get a rectangle, I can do all these other things to or with the data coming from the rectangle. And then take that one step further, inside of, say, a mogurt, if you will, I can give this a length and a width. Bam, that's data that can be fed from Premiere. Oh, whoop-de-woo. Now this is going to help me build a bunch of other things. The graphs and stuff as well. All of those data fields can be pushed into mogurts. So you can now be deploying this stuff in Premiere as you desire. So, and hopefully forming the basis for other more kind of advanced stuff. So, for example, the bar graph I wanted to put in here, because I wasn't done ranting about
Can I make a quick theory about the postage stamp?
Sure. About its
so it's a rectangle. Yeah. Is it just another dotted stroke that's doing those cutaways? Although you can't. Yeah, that would make sense. But then you'd have to use black and white and then like composite it over itself. So
the
interesting.
The structure of
theory crafting After Effects presets, the coolest of activities.
Yeah. We're not theory crafting role playing games. We come and do this for fun. So the postage stamp itself, if we get into this thing, right, it's the same idea. We can reference stuff. We can make big, make small. Let's get into the rectangle. This one defines itself by an outer rectangle and an offset, and it's two rectangles. But if you look, you can see the construction here.
There's a lot of stuff in there, yeah.
We got some circles that hang out on each of the edges. And then as we make those edges bigger, you can see how the cuts are reacting. And those are repeaters. So those are repeated circles. So that
everything can be a fill so that you can actually merge paths it correctly. Yeah.
Exactly. And it produces the kind of nasty edges, like the way postage stamps are done, right? You print them all out and then a hole punch goes down in a grid, like a die cut. And so this, to me, was like, that's the die cut, because you would end up with corners that look chopped in this way. And we can make the cut size bigger and smaller, and I've got them kind of spacing in this interesting kind of way. So, but again, you could conceive of this as dotted strokes that go around, right? We've got the size of the thing. We can do whatever we want.
You'd have to do some compositing work to make that happen, though, because they would all actually exist.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wouldn't work if you were on a different colored background.
Yeah, and it was definitely a consideration because, again, we wanted as many of the controls to live in the properties panels as possible. And so that people are really only having to split their attention between here and then over here. Maybe people put this under this. I don't know how people are living.
Well, we know how at least one person is living because our old pal Theo here says, I work hard manual labor and come home and watch this. And I don't know how to interpret that. I feel like we owe him an apology.
Yeah. And then I watched this for joy. Oh, boy. Wow. But no, we're meant to be a mirthful retreat from people's lives. That's the idea.
One would hope, yes.
We hope. I did want to talk a bit about data, floors, and ceilings. So
love it.
This is part of, say, the bar graph is a floor and ceiling. Again, bar graph is for volume data. How many of a thing compared to how many of other thing. Very useful as bar graph goes. And, we only did the 3. We didn't do any compound bar graphs, which we could have, but we didn't. My thinking is you can come up with the compound bar graph by just putting 3 bar graphs over top of each other. You'll figure it out.
Whoa!
Yeah. Boom.
How dare you? Yep.
But this one has a bars in use slider, which I really like because its maximum number of values is 12, the minimum number of values, none. But, this ability to type in a number of values and then we can deal with things like, making the bars wider. If you had a 4 type of thing, you could end up with something like this. So that could be a nice bit of business. But the idea of floors and ceilings are really important when it comes to bar graphs because if this axis down here in the corner doesn't represent 0, you better be saying what that is, right? And some bar
back to
graphs,
Evan's earlier rant.
Hey, I'm back. It's me. It's me, Visio, the graph corrector, and I'm here to tell you. But that type of thing when you're communicating data, because the difference between 100 and 101 doesn't look like a lot until you zoom in and the scale is the floor is 100, the top of the graph is 101. Now we're dealing with the points in between. So the granularity, especially if you're trying to, say, trick newspaper readers into thinking crime.
This doesn't seem like a very actually interesting statistic unless you're just trying to extract some meaning that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, exactly. But it's counting cash is also manual labor. That's true. You can get RSI from counting cash. You can get it happens.
Look, I'm manually moving this Wacom pin around. Like that's
sure.
labor.
Yeah, Kyle, you and I do a lot of manual.
Look at these hands, Evan.
Yeah. The calloused hands of a working man. You can tell. Working person. Everyone gets calloused hands. All human get callous. So yeah, that is the idea behind the bar graph. Let's talk about some of the. Okay. I found it one thing.
It's going to be a treat when Evan laughs at himself before he's even applied it.
Well, these are things that I was like, how is this not a thing already? And so this is Evan's take on anime speed lines.
Yeah. Which again, I believe that we touched on in an earlier episode.
Yeah. So this is the official final version of anime speed line as it appears now. And I was floored that this is not part of stuff. Oh man, two giant countertops. Lovely. Excellent. Love a countertop. But yeah. Look, there's real people doing real labor.
Theo's doing actual work while we sit here and make jokes about animation software.
Yeah. I hurt my spine lifting a keyboard today. No, I use a standing desk because sitting has destroyed my once youthful body. It's a totally other type of damage that you do. You can be destroyed by overuse. You can be destroyed by underuse.
Well, and of course, Evan, we regularly take psychic damage from occasional client work that we do.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where like, what was this person doing? What was their career? Oh, they were an air traffic controller. They have cortisol levels coursing through their blood 24/7 that like absolutely obliterate their internal organ. So like, no, they were just processing notes from clients all the time. They were in a constant state of anxiety. It was very bad. It's very bad for your body. So in this one though, here we go. We got. I was confounded that there were not already anime speed lines in here. How does this work? Well, let's just look at it one kind of layer at a time, or one.
If we must.
One thing at a time. When you just double click on a preset, it's going to apply a gray solid out in the world, and then it's going to start applying stuff to that, right? And so then, boop, little fractal noise on top of this. The flavor of fractal noise is a basic block, and it's evolving. It's pretty contrasty, it's pretty bright, but that's the idea. So base level, this is what's going on, is this. The fractal noise, I guess what we would say the mother sauce of all sort of effects, I guess, if that helps. The mirepoix of our effects gumbo out here. If anyone doesn't know, mirepoix is the sort of 3 vegetable stock that is the basis for most French or French adjacent cooking in other cultures.
Which of course includes Cajun, which is a descendant. Yep.
But in some cultures, it would be it's onion, carrot, celery. In others, it is like onion, peppers.
Yeah, so you're going to make a rule and then immediately break it.
Well, I mean, that's like Spanish cooking is one way. The point is, fractal noise is that for us. Okay. Fractal noise is our base that we're doing, right?
Okay.
Anyway,
we got back to it.
So from there, we put a Gauss in the house blur on stuff. The Gauss blur is what's giving us the horizontal streakiness. Not directional blur, because this allows us to repeat those edge pixels, which you want for hard edge. And then here's where things get fun. We can skip some of the middle ones, like CC toner is where the color comes from.
Boring.
Levels, yeah, exactly. The fun stuff here is in power pin. So CC power pin is giving us a pinch, and it's pinching this so that we can give the feeling of speed and directionality to this. And then a little transform so that we can fill back in the corners, right? Then it's levels CC toner, posterized time so that you can get this down to the various frame rates. But the controls go into things like the angle and the pinch amount. How pinched is it? So big pinch, little pinch. And so you can make things feel more or less extreme using the pinching and the angling. And so let's say we were doing like, something that's like blasting up or, whatever the direction is, and then the sort of extremeness of that angle. That was the idea. Now, the way those kind of manifest themselves on the power pin situation is the pinchiness is just pinching these corners more or less together, which is what's causing that. And then the angle is the rotation of the CC transform to move that around. So,
but are those power pin points sticking to the edges of the thing?
Exactly.
Because I was going to say, like, this is pretty cool, Evan, but I might have to disqualify it. It doesn't seem very responsive.
It is. So these are looking at the edges and they're living over there. So if we just call up the specific effects and then we get into the power pin, have a look at the old top left. Where is it living? So again, it is looking at this layer dot height and getting us in the right kind of place for this to live. So it's finding the layer corners and attaching itself to those, which pretty useful stuff. especially because any presets that we make have to conform to whatever people are going to do with them. So these require an amount of relativity, frame relativity, or compositional relativity based on how big or small things are going to be. And a big thing about that is the way fractal noise responds to different sized layers. Like at a certain scale, the fractal noise stops looking like one thing and starts looking like something else. So that is kind of the idea there. And then the other kind of anime inspired one is anime radial. And anime radial is like, I'm having stress, you know. Deborah. Everyone loves Raymond. The anime is pretty wild, I gotta say. Gotta tell you. Deborah, I'm entering the Speed Force. So fun ways you can use this one would be, well, it's just black and white, right? And that's not much to kind of write home about. But
hey, maybe I like black and white.
Sure, yeah, and if that's your vibe, enjoy. But you can always...
But you hate it and it's terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
On this show, people like what they like, but the purpose here, why its default is black and white, is so that you can use the different blending modes to put this sort of over top of other stuff. Or if you were going to make a version of this that lives in the background and a version that's kind of in the foreground, it's easy to blend. When it's just black and white, it's easy to blend. So that's sort of the idea behind why this one isn't the colorful madness of the CC toned other version, basically. But
of course, you're only another effect or two away from that.
Yeah, and so this one, the same thing. It starts with a fractal noise. And then it's your buddy Circle is out here. So there's
good old Circle. A
dark circle in the middle, a threshold to knock down a lot of the values, a little radial fast blur, and then there is a levels and an inversion things that are going on to make this happen. It's a little bit dicey, but this is where some relativity stuff definitely comes in. We have this size slider on here, so you can make stuff that's like...
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
A little bit more, I want to say like angelic kind of in here, like... Ba, 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 and then it gets bigger, bigger, bigger. So that sort of stuff is on the table. But when it comes to, say, the size of the circle, there is a relativity that is really down to where is the center of this thing and what is the radii that really makes sense. So the radius is kind of in here, and this is using that math.min, looking at the comp width and the comp height, so that circle will always make sense based on the size of the thing that we're applying it to. So really useful ideas coming in.
What an amazing callback.
Exactly. That's how you can tell I've been taking improv classes because of all these great callbacks, man. Like it's paying off. Actually, the big benefit I get from improv classes is my ability to self-edit is getting a lot stronger. So you probably can't tell from this, but I'm throwing away a lot of things that were not suitable to say. You can know that they entered my mind, but they didn't come out of my mouth. What other things are kind of good in here? There are some... Well, those Adobe Express ones are...
I do have one suggestion just to kind of... just to demonstrate something for folks, because it popped into my head a little while ago. It's one of the text presets. It's been there a while. I assume there's some new ones also that may do things like this, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to point out for folks, like, if you want to pop over to me for just a second, here is some text. I believe our good friend Jake created this one, but I happen to remember, because I've used this for other demos, that the text animation preset slide in from comp edge is a particularly nice one to demonstrate that these can in fact be aware of the compositions that they're in. And if you are one of those folks that thinks that all the After Effects type animation presets are old and silly, make sure to come in and look at some of these, because a lot of them are actually extremely useful. And you'll see similar control schemes to what you've been seeing on Evan's screen here. And you can just dial in, if you want this character or word, but in this case, you want it top, bottom, left, right, tell it where you want it to come from, and that's where it will come from. And it's aware of the composition that it lives in. And then, if you want to do funkier things with that and nest this in other things or send it out as a Mogurt, use some of those concepts that we've been talking about, and you can probably dive in here and figure out where that lives.
Yeah, there's some maddening stuff going on in there. Yeah, Jake is a beast when it comes to this type of stuff. Anyway, we're at the 5 o'clock. Should probably call it a day here, I guess. Unless was there anything else we were going to do? Are we back next week? I don't remember.
So we are off next week because it is Memorial Day here in the United States of America.
True.
And thus would be our Adobe week, but no.
Yeah. So
no official Adobe live streams.
We'll be memorializing, I suppose. I don't know. You can't just celebrate Armistice Day with the rest of us. You got to make your own.
Nope. We do have to always make our own thing. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're off next week, but stay tuned for whatever the next thing is. I don't think we have a topic for whatever the next show will be. So if you want to make any suggestions about what you would like us to talk about, then please let us know.
Yeah. And if you want to ask us any questions, again, there is a form. Use the form. Put information in the forum so we get it. MotionDesignHotline.com, so you can enjoy previous episodes, like last week's episode that was maybe more focused than this one. And you could enjoy following at EC Abrams and at Kylosaurus Rex on the internet. Our DMs are pretty open, so if you have
wide open,
wide open DMs, get at us on there. We're happy to get into those things. We also have email addresses. Those are not super opaque to find, but it is boring to talk about them. So if you want to get at us, you can find us in all of those fun places, all those ways and means in which to enlist our aid. We are.
I would, you know what? I'll happily take an After Effects question written on a paper airplane thrown through my window, cartoon style.
We demand,
however it gets here.
Yeah, we demand that you physically send us your questions. If you have any screenshots, please print them out and put them in the envelope and send them to us.
Print it out, fax it to yourself, scan that, put it in a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah,
and have that delivered by courier.
Yeah, exactly. The Pony Express will bring it to us as long as no bandits get them on the road, no highway folk accost them. They'll get where they're going. But we got to get where we're going. So Kyle, I'll see you in a couple of weeks, and everyone else, stay creative, be kind to each other, and we will see you all around the internet. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody.